Hey guys, it's Perceive Me here. Today I kind of wanted to start an open-ended discussion and kind of start a dialogue that covers more of the social aspects of Destiny 2. I think most of my audience gets a lot more value out of these types of discussions rather than just a normal survival or trials match. And we have a very special guest today that I'm interested in hearing from in regards to the PvP community holistically and the direction of Destiny 2. And without further ado, Ariana's Val, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, not a problem. And the reason I wanted to speak with you is I think we both have non-traditional playstyles, you being an Ariana's Val player and then me kind of using Fusion mostly. And we probably both see more of the bad side of the PvP community in terms of how most players treat opponents they don't like.
Oh, for sure.
The whole
Yeah, like if you're not using whatever they're using, you're going to get bagged basically.
you're not using what I'm using and you're shit.
Yep.
But I I also think this is a good chance to kind of get past the surface level of another player and see who they are outside of whatever their playstyle is. So my first question is, how did you first get into Destiny?
Sure. So I originally was really into Halo back in the day. Followed Bungie games all the way through Halo, from Halo 2 all through Halo Reach. Was a huge Halo Reach player for the good and the bad parts. Up until they swapped over to being managed, having Halo Reach managed by 343.
Yeah, 343.
Bungie went dark for a little while. I kept tabs on them while they were dark. They had like a whole like hidden side to them while they were working on Destiny in the dark. And basically, once they announced Destiny, I knew that was going to be the game for me. There was just so many motifs and things that really spoke to me as a player at the time, and still do it to this day. But yeah, basically from that moment on, I was a full-time Destiny player.
Yeah. Now, when you first came across the Ariana's Val exotic hand cannon that you eventually ended up kind of building your whole channel around, did you stumble across it when trying guns out, or was it anticipatory, like something you were waiting on when the Shadowkeep expansion came out?
No, so I was actually using like a bow hand cannon combo well before Ariana's came out. It wasn't until they first teased the Ariana's out in a trailer that the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a special hand cannon. That means it's going to take energy ammo. It's going to be able to deal extra damage on its first shot. That means, man, this is going to combo really well with the bow. And before the Ariana's Vow even like landed, and we were even able to get our hands on it first day of Shadowkeep, I was already like 100% all in on it before it even launched. So I knew the moment that they showed off in that trailer, this was going to be completely like what I was going to be able to center my channel around, and basically just make a niche around that.
Yeah, you're on top of it.
Yeah.
All right. And I've seen people use a bow and swap to a hand cannon, like before the exotic was in the sandbox, like a legendary 120 hand cannon. But what separates the Ariana's Vow from like a legendary 120 in terms of the utility?
Sure. So Ariana's does extra damage on its opening shot, which means that basically you can land 2 shots without ever having a headshot. So like if you hit him with a bow in the knees, you can immediately hit him in the knees again with the Ariana's and get the cleanup really quickly on them. So like the TTK on that is like 0.3, 0.4 seconds without ever having to land a headshot. So that's really what separates it from a normal legendary hand cannon. Because like if you use your typical bow and hand cannon that's both legendaries, you have to land at least 1 headshot. And with this, at least for your first kill, you don't have to land a single headshot. So it's really good for people rushing you because you don't have to sit there and line up the shot.
Yeah, and I've also seen you pair it with that exotic chest piece for Hunter, where you kind of like dodge and don't reload the gun again.
Yeah, Dragon Shadow. Whenever you dodge, you get max handling on all your weapons, which means your ADS speed, your swap speed is literally at the maximum that the game will support. So it makes for really good quick hot swaps.
Yeah, and I always think it's cool to just kind of see how you optimize that playstyle.
For sure, man. It takes a lot of practice, for sure.
So do you have the most Ariana's Vow kills out of everyone? Like, is that a stat you can keep track of, or do you just assume like no one uses this thing that much?
It's pretty close. In terms of being able to track it, I actually asked the Destiny Trials report owner and operator, the developer, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
in his Discord server to run a report for me, just out of curiosity, if he would, and he totally did. He basically pulled up the top 50 people in Trials. That had the most Eriana's kills in trials specifically. So what I did is, because that's only trials only, I use it outside of trials. I use it in quick play and Rumble,
Yeah.
whatever you want. And basically, I ended up running a Charlemagne command for all those players that he had pulled the top 50 for. I was in the top 5 in trials, but I needed to know for everyone, just in case people use it outside of
Yeah.
trials,
Outside of
just
it.
like I do. So ran the report, ran the command on all 50 people, and lo and behold, no one had more than I did at the time. And so at this point in time, I know that if they didn't have more than me then, they definitely don't now.
Yeah, it's safe to say.
Yeah.
Now, what made you stick with Destiny 2 though? Like the game's been out 5 years.
Yeah.
Why not play PvP, a few times and just be like, all right, it's an all right game, but I'm gonna keep going.
I mean,
With another one.
my answer is basically the same as many others, in the fact that it's just the smooth gunplay. No other developer makes a first-person shooter just like Bungie does. Like everything feels very smooth and very fluid. Now, of course, there's the meta problems that come and go from season to season, but the fact that the game's always changing, the fact that the game feels so good at a base level,
Yeah.
it's so easy to come back day after day whenever, like, no other game has what Destiny has in that regard.
Yeah. So here's my next question.
Sure.
Do you like the PvP community? Because I'm in the camp where I like the game more than I like the PvP community around it. I
That's
want to
totally
hear your
fair,
thoughts.
considering, like, if you encounter like a certain dark side of the community, and it does exist, especially on the PvP side of things, it can get really toxic and really hateful really quickly if you get too deep into it. But I think as long as you are able to, like, segregate yourself into the right side of the PvP community, block those who are toxic, block the teenagers that are hateful,
Yeah. You're
like,
not using what I'm using.
exactly. If you pull yourself away from that, and just find the right people that generate positivity in the community, then you can definitely have a good experience, even on the PvP side of things. The problem is you're going to have to sort through a lot of that, and that takes a lot of time, effort, and I don't blame a lot of people that just don't even want to put up with it.
Yeah, and because for me, like as a PvP player, what I've noticed is people kind of come into my stream. Like again, I kind of
Yeah.
run a non-traditional loadout too.
Yep.
They come into my stream with like an adversarial
Oh.
predisposition where
Yep.
they kind of encounter you as an opponent
Right.
and they view you as a player and not like the person behind the player. Like so if
Right.
you use fusion, they're gonna like dismiss you. Oh, you use a fusion rifle, and they already don't like you.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, oh, yeah, I had to play him. It was a tough match, but I think like he's a good person overall.
Right. And I think it takes a special kind of person to be able to come into someone's stream, especially after getting beaten by something, whether it's a fusion rifle or a hot swap combo, like, and be like, yo, I respect that. It's kind of cheesy, but I respect that. It takes a special kind of person, because, like, I'd say 90% of the people that encounter it immediately have that knee jerk reaction of, oh my gosh, I died by this, I lost to this, I dislike this person. And so they come into chat, they're immediately on edge. They're giving off that vibe that they don't actually like you, even though they haven't seen who you are. They've only seen how you play or what you
Exactly.
use. And I definitely think that there should be more people out there that should separate the two in their mind. Okay, the player I played against isn't the person that they are, sort of
Yes.
deal.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of shows a sign of maturity when you can handle two conflicting commotions at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I think it's a shallow worldview if you kind of go into something being like, oh, here's all the good people, here's all the bad people. I'm only gonna stay by the good people. Like
Right.
the issues arise when it comes to like dealing with issues where you might have a good person who has a lot of bad people around them,
Yeah.
or you might, have a bad person who's really bad, but he just does good things to kind of cover it up. So I think there's maturity and being able to work through conflicting emotions or like being able to see things for what they are.
For sure. And I think that part of the problem is Destiny is definitely catered, or there's a lot of players that are part of the demographic that are 25 or younger. And I think that speaks to a large part of why there's so much of the negative side to the community, because there's still up and coming adults that are still trying to figure out their lives, still trying to figure out who they are, and throwing in like stress and toxicity of a video game in there doesn't really help. And so there's not that level of maturity always in those kinds of players, but you can definitely tell those who can separate real life and in a video game and say, okay, I lost in a video game, big whoop, like what's it matter, sort of deal. There's not very many younger folk that can do that, but those that do, and they come into my chat sometimes, and I love them for it, because like you can tell that they were raised well. They can separate those things in their mind, and they just realize like it's just a game, man. Like there's no way, like no reason to get too pressed about it. It's just, we're here for fun. It's a video game. The whole purpose of a video game is for entertainment and for fun value. And if that's not happening for you, maybe just uninstall.
Yeah. I think there's also a difference between just playing a game. Like, people don't have to treat each other well, quote unquote. There's no rules to it. Where if you're just playing a game, I think it becomes way more valuable. And for me, at least, like as soon as I started streaming, trying to build something,
of course,
like, and I'll use example where like if you're building a sandcastle, it's easier to do it with other people who are at the beach with you for a long time, and they could like help you build the castle. Like someone who's gonna just be there, once or twice, say something negative and leave. Like they're not gonna help you build it.
Right. No, and Destiny is definitely a game that from the get-go was made for playing with other people. If you play Destiny on your own solo the entire time, I very highly doubt that you'd be playing very long. At some point in time, whether you want to raid, whether you want to do Nightfalls, play Iron Banner, odds are you're going to group up with someone, whether it's your friends, someone from LFG, one way or another, you're going to have to work with others in Destiny. And I think that's why it's so good, is because you want to play with others. The game encourages you to do so, and it only makes the game better for it.
Yeah. So, and if you don't mind me, like, where did you first start streaming?
On Twitch, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean about it. Like where?
Or when?
When?
Like when? Yeah.
Oh, that was between Forsaken and Shadowkeep. So that was when I first really started getting into bow combos, and I realized I had something special that wasn't just a normal hand cannon shoddy combo. Because before then, I think I was just like an ace of spades or like a chaperone main. Actually, I was a chaperone main. Chaperone and like Not Forgotten, like every other person at that point in time. And so once I realized that I could move away and use something else that wasn't meta, that was not what everyone else was using, I realized I could actually make a niche out of this. That like if I am to build a Twitch channel out of this, I need to have something that's unique. It can't just all circle around about being really good at the game or being really personable. Like you have to have a combination of things. You have to have a niche, you have to be decent enough, and you have to have a decent enough personality at the same time. And if you put all your eggs in one of those baskets, it's never going to work out for you.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, between Forsaken and Shadowkeep.
Yeah. And Shadowkeep came out in 2019, so it's been about 3 years.
Yep.
And also, you do have to kind of make yourself stand out.
Yep. 100%.
Now, do you have like an end goal with streaming and content creation, or is it just kind of like a fun thing at this point?
For me, at this point, it's just a side hobby. It's something where people were always interested in seeing the gameplay for it. They were always curious how it was working. I'd get a lot of comments saying, "Hey, are you using a macro? Are you doing something cheating wise? Are you doing something abusing a glitch? Like, how are you swapping so fast?" And so I ended up just saying, "Screw it! I'm just going to stream and show people like, hey, this really isn't that." Like crazy of a thing, right? Like you just throw on an exotic, throw on a couple weapons, and boom, you can quick swap just like anyone else could. It just takes a little bit of practice.
Yeah, because I'm at the point in Destiny 2 where my builds and weapons are relatively optimized,
right?
And I've kind of min-maxed. And when I play now, it's almost more of a showcase. So that's kind of how I stream. But with the social part of PvP, a worry of mine is like, what if I grow in a community I don't like that much?
Yeah,
And it's like whether I improve stat wise or directory wise on Twitch, it's like what's the point of being number one in the community you aren't proud of if you aren't proud of the achievement? So
100%. And
so
I think that's a part of the reflection of how you act as a streamer. If you are abusive in chat or in game, you're going to attract those who are also that way. But if you time people out, if you ban people, if you tell people, hey, I don't, you're not welcome here if you're going to act like this. I'm not acting this way. You shouldn't either. You're going to try and basically generate that same kind of community that you're putting the same kind of vibes towards.
yeah, you get what you give. And
Exactly. You are
that's
who you're friends with in a large part, because
yeah,
who you surround yourself with is a large part of who you are at your core.
yeah,
So like if you hang around people who do bad things, I mean, odds are you're probably not doing great things yourself.
yeah. I heard there's a saying where it's like you're the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, like
Yep,
that type of thing.
100%.
But
It's really true. I mean, people don't say that for no reason.
yeah, and I do put a lot of value on like my network of friends and the players I play with because to me, at the end of the road, streaming isn't necessarily a single player mission. I kind of want to end up in more of a network, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
And there's just a lot more value in making it with a group. And I don't know if you'd agree with that or not.
Oh, I definitely do, and I think that the more community that has positive values behind them, the better. And the best way that you can do that is to show who you are, and the best way to do that is through streaming. So
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to really expand past that if you're not showing people who you are.
yeah. And I'm kind of going to shift gears here. So
Sure.
there was a Forbes article from earlier last month that kind of covered the issue of Destiny 2 developer harassment leading
Hmm.
to less communication from Bungie. Like, have you seen any of that on
Yeah,
Twitter?
I have. Yeah, I've been
Okay.
keeping pretty in check with how Bungie and the community have kind of been butting heads.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. So pretty much, for those who don't know, Destiny's sandbox lead developer pretty much said that the Destiny 1 exotic Twilight Garrison, it's more of like a Titan movement exotic, wasn't going to return to the game because it didn't necessarily align with the vision or power fantasy they had in mind for Titans. And he was pretty much just met with insults, threats from angry players who wanted the exotic back. And instead of voicing things in a way that was constructive, even if they didn't like the answer, they kind of like took it too far. And I think it really shows how reactionary people are because my thing is like, where's the win here for PvP players and all this? Like the community as a whole just ends up less when the devs stop talking.
Oh, 100%. Like we really, as a community, value communication, and I think we're a little spoiled by the fact that we get weekly updates from Bungie, whether they're light updates or heavy updates. Obviously, that it kind of is a mixed bag from week to week. But like very few other developers do what Bungie does in that regard, and I think we're a little spoiled by that. And so we have a high expectations. And when those expectations, when they come out for like special info drops of when Kevin Yanes said, "Hey, this isn't coming. Y'all shouldn't expect this." People immediately have that knee jerk reaction of like, "Yo, we've been asking for this. Why aren't we getting what we want?" It's like the community has a little bit of higher expectations. They have. Uh,
They need to
I
be
don't know,
humbled. They need to be
a
humbled.
little bit,
That's
honestly.
essentially what it is. And
Yeah,
I'll take over. But like, I think the issue is they could have approached the issue in a way because I think the silver lining here is that there's a need or a desire for like a movement accelerant for Titans. I think that's
100%.
what it is, and there's
And I
multiple ways
think
to do that.
I think players got that a little bit with the shoulder charge and the movement that they've been granted with that. With Void 3.0, they revamped the shoulder charge, so now it can be used as movement. And I think people are wanting that for every class. They're wanting that for uh, uh, basically having the same thing that hunters and warlocks have in their movement ways, but with an
Yeah,
exotic. And the problem is like that was never the core concept behind Titans. They were always designed initially with being these tank like figures, not these floaty characters, not these nimble characters. And so I understand why Bungie is choosing to go that way. I definitely think they could have gone about it a little bit better, but there should have never been the kind of backlash they got on Twitter and on social media for just saying, hey, this isn't the direction we're going. Like, there's other ways that the community could have been like, hey, can we get that kind of movement in other ways outside of Twilight Garrison, maybe?
Yeah, I think the negative, voices or negative actions kind of have too much leverage. I think this is a case where like there's a better way to approach this problem set. Like if you have a desire for something in the game, there's a better way to approach it, or at least kind of have a developer kind of defend their stance more and be like, okay, here's something that I have an issue with. Like, can you walk me through this, or at least have that open dialogue? As soon as you sever a line of communication, especially with like the top sandbox dev, like that's a bad look. We end up with less. Like,
oh, for sure. And I think that the people that spoke up then about the Twilight Garrison thing was definitely a very vocal minority. I don't think every single, I think that was maybe like a very vocal, like maybe 10% that were super into like the concept that Twilight Garrison had in D1, and they would love to see it return. But like if Bungie cuts off those ties, like you're talking, we could be seeing a Bungie that only communicates through the Bungie forums in the future. They would no longer be replying to Reddit threads, replying to people over Twitter. Like, we could be looking at a future where, because of that local, like that very vocal minority of maybe 10% of hyper toxic players, they just say, screw it, and let's move it away and just be more reclusive and be able to moderate these responses, because we're not having the harassment that we're getting elsewhere.
yeah, I can't blame them at this point, because I think the people who lose out the most is people who, have an image surrounded around Destiny 2. So mainly, like for me, it'd be content creators, right?
Right.
The PvP and PvE, it's a bad look.
Oh,
Especially
for sure.
like when communicating less means less for you, like it does affect you.
Oh,
So
100%. If they pull back and there's literally less content for you to make content on,
yeah,
like if you imagine if they were to pull back TWABs from a weekly occurrence to a monthly or a quarterly occurrence, think about Astacross or other content creators that make literal TWAB videos week to week and have money writing on those TWAB videos. Like,
yeah,
that is literal loss of communication translating to lost revenue for people who've made it their job on a day-to-day basis.
yeah. And I don't think people realize how much like a decision like that would really affect them, assuming they stick with it.
Right.
And my fear is that there's gonna be a growing disconnect between the direction of the game as a live service and the PvP community, and I'll kind of explain why.
Okay.
Like, if you're in the Crucible playing the same maps over and over, you're essentially playing a piece of the game.
Yep.
And a majority of your time will be spent playing old maps and what you consider to be like old content.
Right.
So if they end up vaulting content that you're familiar with and don't tell you what they're adding, you're kind of in a compromised position where, as a PvP player, you're just getting spoon-fed content in a live service model that doesn't necessarily benefit you.
Yeah.
And the sense of direction is what you kind of end up losing out on.
Yeah, 100%. Like the maps, they've thankfully stated that they're going to get better about PvP maps in the future. But that does probably mean that while they'll be adding probably one reprised map from D1 and probably one new map every now and then, that also means that they're probably going to be taking away less favorite maps, something like Dead Cliffs, where they've tried to go back to the drawing board several times on trying to fix the spawns on that map and just walked away unsuccessful a couple times now. So I could definitely see them pulling that map and adding new ones. But the thing is like the live service aspect to PvP is just not there. Bungie knows that Destiny at its core is a PvE game with PvP tacked on at this point. They do balance changes, they do update PvP on a regular basis, but they know that the money is in PvE. There's more revenue to be made on that side, more profit. And while PvP players are there, they know that the vast majority of players play PvP maybe once or twice a week at most. Maybe they knock out some pinnacles, maybe they just play it casually, but the majority don't play it every single day. And I think Bungie realizes that. They have the data, they have the stats to prove that, and I think their resources go where the money is, because that's just what the financial side, like that just makes sense as a business, you know?
Yeah, especially if they were just at this point, the game's been out
Oh
so
yeah.
long that they kind of probably have a good sense of where their resources and dev time should
For
go.
sure, for sure. And I commend them on at least saying, "Hey, we know we've kind of been lacking on it. We need to at least improve it for the future's sake. Like we can't just keep the same 10 maps or 20 maps or whatever in there indefinitely. There's even for those that play it casually once or twice a week, that's still not acceptable. And I think they know that there's got to be some progress made on that front. And I think that it's just going to take time until we get regular updates like we expect.
Yeah. Now, do you think a purposeful lapse in communication was inevitable? Just given the nature of the internet, how players treat opponents they don't like, were you surprised when people say like, we're gonna pull back communication because like the harassment's just kind of gone too far and there's just
I'm a
too much?
little surprised that the community would all do what they did, but at the same time, Bungie has always been at the forefront of being innovative on the social aspect. Internally, as a company, they are very progressive in terms of being able to support their staff. They were one of the very first companies to be anti-crunch, and I think they support their employees more than almost any other developer out there currently. And so I think this whole movement of them possibly turning back away from social media as an outlet for communication is mostly because they respect their employees and they don't want to have their community managers harassed 24/7 on social media and being like sent death threats, whatever
Yeah,
it is, like on social media. Like obviously these community managers are employees and they want to treat their employees all equally and all fairly. And that means that if they have to pull back and maybe just have all of their communications be done through Bungie.net, a space where they have the power to moderate and not have the kind of harassment that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis on Twitter and on other platforms, then so be it. I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but if they were to do so, I would probably put Bungie as the forefront developer to start doing this, and maybe they are the first of many to go that route.
or essentially just get rid of lines of communications that just aren't sustainable.
Right, completely. And I think the sustainability part, I think they would try and keep up the TWABs from week to week, but I don't think that they would have the same kind of direct contact with players like they do currently on Twitter. Like you see Hippie replying to people 8 hours a day sometimes, and that's really awesome because that means that we have someone that we can rely on to hear our voice and our feedback on a constant basis, which is a good thing as long as we don't abuse it. And the problem is a certain vocal minority right now are abusing it and using it to harass her and the rest of the community managers
Yeah.
and the other devs for that matter.
Do you think we're doing this all wrong? Like as PvP players, when it comes to streaming, the community kind of being fragmented, no sense of direction, the flawed ideologies that players have and how they treat others. Like,
I think what we're doing wrong is we're not calling out those who are doing what is wrong. And there are certain community members that I won't name, but they support this kind of thing. And either Bungie has to take a stand against them, those that support them, or we as a community need to stand up and say, hey, this is not acceptable. This is not who we are. And you should either not support them or you should block them. Like we need to start making some sort of communal agreement of like, hey, this is not who we are. This is who we are. And we want to have Bungie say, all right, listen to this group of people and not those who are yelling, screaming, and sending death threats because that's not who the Destiny community is at its core.
I think I, I don't know if leadership's the right word, but I definitely think there needs to be a set of principles that people can agree on because I don't know if saying, don't listen to them, but listen to these guys is the right thing. But hey, listen to the people who follow these set of principles. Like they respect.
100%. I think what Bungie should really do is set those ground rules because otherwise it's the
Yes.
community setting those rules and that's never going to end up very well. If Bungie says, "Hey, if you're toxic on stream, if you're doing things that are over a certain line and they can say basically set that line
Yeah.
in words in actual terms on their website or in a TWAB, then the streamers have to follow them. Like if you look at the recov situation, Bungie set a line at saying, hey, no more doing recovs. If you do them on stream, we're going to ban you. How many people do you see streaming recovs today? None. For that very reason, Bungie set a boundary right there. And the problem is how do you set a boundary that acts on people's behavior? And so if they are able to like tangibly do so, you can actually shift the entire discussion away from toxicity into something that's building a community for the better.
Yeah, you're almost going to be tasked with, changing what's normalized in a community that doesn't necessarily like treat people they don't like or treat opponents.
100%. Yep. And I think they've kind of gotten off on the wrong foot already. There was another controversy a while back where they were trying to go that route and people kind of pushed back on it. But I think Bungie really does have another shot with this whole Twilight Garrison movement of toxicity to say, hey, listen, this is not what we're going to accept here. And we're going to start either banning people or blocking people from being able to communicate at all if you're going to just be like this. So I think they just have to set ground rules for people and start enforcing them in one way or another.
Yeah, I think now we're in a spot where, just the image of like what a PvP player is has kind of lost so much leverage. They'd be justified in setting boundaries or setting rules like that.
100%. And it's their game. They can do what they want with it. And if people don't like it, then they can uninstall. But like, I think a vast majority of people can be civil with each other. And I think Bungie doesn't want people's money if they're going to be harassing them. And I think that's what it comes down to, is they respect themselves more than they respect their wallet, which I think is very commendable, because many other developers have owners or management that prioritizes profit over everything. And I think Bungie is one of the few good ones that realizes like we can be better.
Yeah. And I guess I'll kind of end with this question. Like,
sure.
Given, the big picture, the issues going on, like, do you think there's value if someone says, I want to become the best D2 player? Is that as meaningful anymore?
I don't think it ever really did have meaning, to be honest. Being the best in a video game only really means much whenever you can translate it to the real world value. And the problem is there's no tangible way of quantifying who the best is. Everyone has an idea of some top players in Destiny PvP, but like if you consider top players in other video games, the tangibility there really comes down to who wins money, who wins things, who gains fungible things in real life. And really the only way that you can quantify that in Destiny is Twitch views, I guess. And that's not much. That's not saying a whole lot. Like, sure, there's a lot of money to be made on Twitch, but I think there's more people that stream PvE than PvP with thousands of views. So
yeah, it's interesting too, because there could be someone with thousands of views, like you said, who are a relatively average player, but there's also, you're right, like you could be a good player, but maybe you don't have transferable skills, or what we'll call it, that could kind of transfer over to a different medium. So I think that was a good answer of like, there's value in the transferable skills that could probably come along with that.
To me, the tangible value of Twitch streamers in Destiny, at least, are, I mean, PvE streamers have quantifiably more views on average than PvP players in total. If you think about Glad, and he's like a cornerstone, him, King Gathalion, there's tons of huge names in the Destiny community, and all of them that have these multi-thousand viewership like streams, the only one that I can think of that's a PvP centric is Grenader Jake.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's the only one that comes to mind. But then you look at the PvE side, and like you have huge streams that go over like 1,000, 2,000 on Grey Day, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. You don't see PvPers with hundreds of thousands ever. So like, to me, there was never a concept of top PvP player means anything in Destiny. It's a PvE game first. Unfortunately, Bungie has treated it like that. because that's where the money is. But that doesn't mean that it should be ignored by any means. But I definitely think that being top in Destiny isn't anything to put on your resume.
Yeah. And for the people watching, I just kind of want them to ask themselves, be introspective and say, when I do play Destiny and I'm like working on a core skill set and trying to like build up, how well I play, kind of know what's important so you can like know what you get the most out of for your time. I think
For
that's
sure.
kind of the big takeaway there.
Yeah, to me, Destiny is a loot centric game, and to me, being good at Destiny PvP means that I get more like Crucible related loot and faster. And to me, getting better at Destiny, the incentive there is if I want to get better, then that means I'm going to get better loot or more loot, and that's something that benefits me. Now, there's a threshold to that. Like at a certain point, you're not going to get loot any faster than Grenader Jake, as I said earlier. Like he's a great PvP player, but I'm probably earning just as much loot as he is. And even though I'm a great player, like
yeah, like your return on investment is the same because you spend as much time as him.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. And guys, it was a great discussion, and Ariana's was definitely the right person for this. I'm glad I reached out. And
appreciate it, man.
I always think it's good to hear a different perspective sometimes. So for the people watching Ariana's, where can they find you and drop a follow?
Sure. My channel is twitch.tv/Ariana's all one word. And I stream every Sunday, and kind of depends on the week, day to day, during the rest of the week. But you can definitely catch me on Sundays. Yeah, Ariana's Val is the channel name. And
Alrighty.
it's I got two of them behind me, so pretty easy easy to remember whenever you see me on stream.
Yeah. And guys, if you learned something or have something you'd like to add, just leave it in the comments and I'll see it. I'll also leave timestamps and a link to our Twitch channels below. So thank you for your time. Peace.
Thank you.
All right. That I thought it would be harder.
Nah, that was
harder than that.
That was pretty straightforward.
I'm like, man, I hope I don't get myself canceled by
nah. Anything, you're the one that's asking the question. That's going to be me.
So. Yeah.
But at this point, like, you don't understand. I already get plenty of hate for for other things. So.
And I'm like, when I was piecing this together, I'm like, who has a non-traditional playstyle who's like deal with like hateful comments often? Because me, I do it.
Yeah.
But on my perspective, like, I don't care. Like, I'm kind of cold-hearted in a sense where it's just like it doesn't affect like
like
and it's because here I'll say this. It's one thing if I play Fusion and I'm just like doing it to like how do I say this? If I don't really like fusioning and I'm just doing it to win, but like I really like fusioning, like it's fun to me. Like I enjoy it. So like insulting me about the playstyle,
it's like it just goes off you.
It's like I really like doing this. I don't know. Maybe it's cringe, but I feel like is your approach the same when it comes to like the Ariana's Vow? Like if someone's like, I hate this, it's like, bro, this is my favorite way to play the game.
To me, it's more like, man, if you don't like it, take it up with Bungie. Like it's in the game. You know, it's what I enjoy doing. Or you want to really knock what I enjoy doing? Why don't you find something you enjoy doing instead of coming here into like my chat and like slamming me for it? You know,
how do you deal with hate? Like, because a deep question, because it's just like,
I mean,
there's some people who like it's like a mental health thing where like it affects them. I think.
Oh no, for me, definitely not. It's more of trying to foster a better community. If you allow that in chat on a regular basis, like you're only going to attract more people like that, and you don't want that because it's just gonna, like we said earlier, it's just gonna create a negative feedback loop essentially. And so for me, I tolerate it for a little while, mostly for content's sake, because it's really funny to have everyone be like, haha, look at this guy, he's mad in chat, and then ban. But like banning, blocking, trying to eliminate that from your community is usually best practice.
I think I'll say this. I was in a generation like before the internet was a thing. I got to live a life outside. You know, I was from like, even when I think back to Halo, like one of my neighbors, they'd have an Xbox. I didn't at the time, so I'd have to go over to his house and play. And there was like a certain level of experience that you get outside of the internet.
Oh,
and a lot of kids nowadays, they'll like they live on their phone. They live on
Yeah,
Twitter. Like they
yeah,
live in I'll call it toxicity or just like lack of respect for other people when they communicate.
yeah. And I think a lot of that is just how they were raised. I think whatever, maybe it's a trend of how parenting has gone lately, and not enough parents are really involved in their kids' online life, and maybe that's a consequence of that. But I think a lot of the younger generation right now have shown that they don't see any consequences for what they do or say online. And I
When it
think
comes,
that's really what plays into it.
what's your take on like I'll say it like I don't know. I don't want to say all tournament players are like this, but like the elitism when it comes to input methods.
Mhm.
Do you is it justified or even like
No,
loadouts? If you want to
by no
just call
means.
loadout,
No,
okay.
no. Like, you don't understand. Like, a lot of people have to use the input method they do because their body forces them to. And I think a lot of people don't even consider that as a thought of like, oh wait, these people have to use a controller because they have to. Like they don't have the kind of arm movement that other people do, or they use. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Xbox accessibility controller, but like it's literally like a giant gamepad. It's like, are you gonna
Oh,
slam people for using that if that gives them an advantage? Like people let people use what they use. Like, as long as the game supports it, like
yeah.
it should just be that simple.
Because I think there is that like level of like separation. Like it kind of goes back to people being adversaries when they meet. It's just like, bro, people disqualify like making a friend for any reason at this point.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
oh,
no.
I don't like he uses this, or like bro, there's
What it
people
boils
who
down to is simple human like thought process is loves the idea of tribalism of I'm in this tribe, they're in that tribe, fuck those guys.
yeah.
Is basically like it's the meme of like red team versus blue team. I'm red team, so blue team immediately is on the bad side. Like, just because they're
Oh,
not on my team, like that doesn't mean that they're the enemy, sort of
yeah.
deal. I think it just boils down to normal tribalism that humans have always been part of since the dawn of time.
Yeah.